Hello and welcome back. In today's tutorial, we'll be going over the Layer Manager in AutoCAD and discussing its properties and filtering tools and tips and tricks. My name is Moshe Kieran, and let's look at the agenda. We'll be talking about understanding the layers that are available in the Layer Manager and their importance, the different tools that are available, setting up and managing the properties, the line styles, and the colors, and we'll be discussing how to filter, isolate, and more tips in order to quickly identify the layers that you need when viewing and editing AutoCAD drawings. So without further ado, let's get started. To begin today's tutorial, I have opened up a new AutoCAD drawing along with some samples which I will be showing shortly. So to illustrate the importance of layer properties, AutoCAD has actually put it on the very start home ribbon. If we pan over, we can see on the top we have this icon called the layer properties. If we click on it, it executes the command and it opens it as dialog with various tabs. To take a look, in a new AutoCAD drawing, we have just a single layer as shown as the 0 layer, with the defaults of having the on, the freeze layer shown, a lock, plotting, color, line type, line weight, transparency, viewport, and description. So let's take an understanding of what each of these corresponding headers mean. And the best way to illustrate that is with a started drawing. So in this sample, if I once again navigate to the top, this time I'll type it via command, via the layer command, just another way to access that dialog. We can see that this drawing now has 9 layers total. If we take a look, we can see various colors being used, line types, and all the visibilities being shown. The current checkmark on the left shows which layer is currently the active one. If we look on the top, we can see that the default layer for a new line work is going to be set to 0. So if I type, let's say, the polyline command, PL, and I drag across, I press enter, I now have a line on the 0 layer. If I select an element in the drawing and I hover over, I can see this is layer 103. We can see that if I click on it as well, it will show it up on the top. Another way to view those properties is via the handy-dandy property palette, where we can see again the layer, the line type, and all the same properties that we have available in this dialog. Checking out, if I wanted to change my default, I would only need to double click, and that way my new line type is set to 103, 102. Next, let's dive into what the on versus freeze command does. Both seem very similar, but we will discuss key differentiations. The on visibility shows the visibility of a layer. So let's say I wanted to hide all the green elements. If I click on this one, I can see that it's 102 from the properties. And I click on that little hide button, and it hides all of the green layer line work. If I click on the freeze, on screen it seems to be doing the same exact thing. The key differentiation is a freeze actually speeds up performance by making elements not regenerate in the background, while a visibility is used for things that you only want to temporarily hide. Let's take a look. Let's say I go ahead and I turn off the visibility on the green line work. If I do a quick select, I look at my drawing, I sort down to my layers, and I set it to 102, and I try and click OK, we can see in the command that it has selected 1,838 items. Now, let's do the same thing, but let's freeze what's on screen. So again, I will type the quick select command. I'll go down to layer and I will again set it equal to 102. This time, 0 items were selected because it has eliminated the selectability of those layers by freezing them. Next, let's talk about locking. Locking makes it so that whatever is on that layer is no longer editable. So even as I try to click, I can't do any of my typical move commands. I can't change the layer of it. It is fixed in the background, and hence it has added a transparency element too. Plotting is for elements in which you would like to show up in PDFs, which we will show on the next example. Color, pretty self-explanatory. Line type, in this case, if I take a look at the arc, I see that's layer 103. Let's take a look. We can see that the line type is set to continuous. If I want to, let's say, add a new layer, I can go to right click, do new layer, and this one I will call dashed. Here I will change the line type to have a center line dash type. I'll click OK. And now, if I would like, I could change the layer of this line that I had previously drawn, change it to dashed, and just like that, it has changed the appearance of the line to give it that dashed look to it. In this case, if we look at the properties, we can see that the line type has been overwritten from the layer properties to be a centerline type. So if we would default to the layer-based properties for the line type, it would go back to being a centerline, and that's being generated via our layer manager. Next, line weight type is the appearance of how thick something will show up. So let's go back to this 102. If we were to change the line weight thickness, we could have it appear thicker. If we zoom in, nothing has appeared yet on screen until we go to our tools on the bottom and we show line weight. And now, when we turn that on, we can see that it has enhanced the thickness of our line types. Turn that off, it goes back to the default thickness. Set it back to 0. Lastly, transparency lets you configure how much you would like to be shown through. And another useful one is the description. Often, you'll have a lot more than just 10 layers in a drawing. Descriptions are great to sort what layers they are, whether the line work is a property line or a element or text. That way, it's easy to sort as well. Having explained how each of the headers work, let's now dive into some more additional tips. If we look on the top ribbon, we have icons that have options to show all, to thaw all. Let's take a look at kind of what they do. Let's say I wanted to only edit the line work in green. So I could hover over, do what's called an isolate selected layer, and that way it hides everything else except for that specific layer. Hence, it turned all the other elements and it turned their visibility to off. A way to reverse that is I can click this little icon and turn all the visibility back. Same thing with the freeze. If I wanted, I could go one by one and freeze each layer. So let's say I wanted to freeze all those line work. It thereby froze whatever was on layer 103, and it kept everything else as visible. Once again, you can do a thaw all. And you have the options to do either one by one, as shown at top, or usually bulk options. I will note as well a very useful tip called the walkthrough layer. If I click on this and I want to see what's on each layer, I can actually pan down with my keyboard and I can see these elements are on the 0 layer. There's nothing on the 110. All those are on 102 and so on. To give another context of how things were sorted, think of layers as a sort of sorting for line work. So close, and now everything's back on screen. Lastly, let's show a quick another command called the make current or match layer. So let's say I wanted to draw more line work, zooming in, similar to the green. Or let's actually go with this 103. So my current layer, as shown in the check mark, is 102. If I click on make current and I look at the dialog on bottom, the command line is saying, which layer would you like to be current? So I'll click on this one. Now it is reconfigured and selected the 103. So that way if I draw my polyline, it is now on that 103 layer. Let's say I actually would like to match the line work. This new line actually should be on 102. So I have an option to do match layer. I can select the object that I would like to change, press the spacebar, destination of layer, and I click the layer that I would like it to match. And now it has updated this layer to be the 102. Fantastic. Now let's take a look at our third sample file. Once again, now we have our model space and layout. Let's take a look at our model space to get started. And let's take a look at the properties. And here we can see we have a lot more. We actually have 70 layers here. And various layers have prefixes. Most of them are pre-descriptive layers. Sometimes they're abbreviated, in which case you can check and see if there is a description. We have some cache symbols and so on. Typically, you'll find prefixes such as the A correspond to architectural. C is for civil, and you'll find things like the V for survey data. Let's say I would like to filter this long list of 70 to just focus on the architectural ones. So in this case, I could right-click and do a new property filter. Here, I can choose to filter the name. In this case, I will say A dash asterisk. Anything that starts with A. Actually, I can even go ahead and the A asterisk is the wildcard, meaning that anything that follows suit after this specific character set should be included. So I'll click OK. Now I can see that my list has been filtered down to just 15. I can rename this filter to be architect. And now I can just work on these specific layers as I'm working. Another option is if you want to search this long list, let's say I would like to look for window. So I can go to the top and I can start typing window. Nothing showed up. Let's take another look. Maybe if I do a start in front and a start afterwards, that allows it to pick up even in a case like this where the prefix wasn't exactly matching. So it says if there's any text that has the word window, it should show it. So that way I'm able to find the specific layer that I'm interested in. Just click exit. Next, we can also filter the headings similar to like any Excel file to see which ones have their visibility off, which ones have their freeze layers, and lock and so on. Next, it's worth mentioning, since we see these interesting names, when we find a sort of cache symbol, as shown here. This corresponds to when a file was binded to another one. So it keeps the layers, but adds this little asterisk to show that typically the block format that was modified has been shown. So let's zoom in. If I click on this element, I can see that it's an XREF. If I right click and I go to the properties, you can see it's a block reference. Let's say I wanted to see everything that was initially available. I could do a thaw all, and we can see that there's a lot more data that was shown initially, but was hidden in order to reduce the clutter shown. Let's undo a couple times. And there we go. Now let's take a look at our layout tab. When we look, if we double click our scroll wheel, when we look at our layers, we'll see an extra column called viewport line types. Here is where we can actually choose to differentiate between how something shows up in our viewport space, where we can then plot, and what is shown up typically in the model space. So here we have extra configuration options. So if we pan up and go to the top, and let's just do a control, a shift select, so on all these, and turn them on, we can see that these elements, such as the viewport boundaries, were previously hidden. Let's just do an undo. You'll hide sometimes the viewports, so that way they don't print. Another option is to click that little do not print plot, so that way, even though it's showing up on this view, when you go to print, it will avoid those line works. This is typically used for layers such as def points, to have line work that you can use, but not show up in a printed PDF. Fantastic. So just to recap, in this video, we discussed the Layer Manager, talked about the layers, the different headings and their importance in terms of visibility, how you organize and structure your AutoCAD drawing. We talked about colors, line styles, visibility, and plotting. And we also showed some very helpful tips on how to match your layers, the filtering tools, and being able to search in order to find the layers that you're interested in right away. I hope you enjoyed, and see you in the next one.